So it's a multidisciplinary collaborative project, meaning that we bring in disciplines, faculty, and students from around the grounds at University of Virginia. And our goal is to create affordable, prefabricated, and ecological or sustainable or environmentally responsible or whatever buzzword you want to use, good, well-built, high-performance housing units. And I work most directly with a colleague of mine in the engineering school, a guy named Paxton Marshall. He's an electrical engineer. He and I have worked together since the Solar Decathlon days when we participated in the first Solar Decathlon. I just threw a couple slides in here of that because I heard there might be some solar decathletes in the audience, and if there are, I'm happy to speak with you. I'm a recovering solar decathlete myself, and it's a challenge to get over that event. So I had to keep my addiction going by taking on this other project. It was an amazing project. We learned a lot from the decathlon. And in particular, I think what we really learned was the power of collaborative work, working directly with people in other disciplines, going through a kind of awkward collaboration of trying to learn each other's vocabulary. And to be able to get beyond the fact that you come from a very different point of view and try to reach some decisions that are good decisions for the overall project. And that's frankly a really difficult challenge, and I think it's something that not only was really helpful for me as a faculty member, but was really helpful for the students. And that's what really basically, having done that, it set this in motion. The decathlon was such a great experience, and the students did such an amazing job, and we're so proud of what we did. But in the end, and I tell this story almost every time I give a talk, it's one of my most consistent things I always mention, is that at the end of the decathlon, we spent almost $400,000 on a 750 square foot house. And it just really felt like, why are we doing this? It was an amazing experience. I don't regret it at all. But in terms of the long-term implications of it and how well the ideas translate to the real housing industry, I felt like we didn't really succeed on that level. And that's not what the event is about. So that's fine. We did the event and it was amazing, and we focused on doing as best we could in that event. But in the long term, I felt I needed to do something different. So that's really where the decathlon, where the EcoMod project comes from. This is a slide that kind of gives you a sense of the range of students and faculty and community members and organizations that have been involved in the project along the way. Some come in for just a very brief time. Some come in and stay. I had one student who we figured out she got like, I don't know, 1/5 of her credits at UVA from participating in EcoMod. So, don't tell the dean that, or don't tell the chair that. But they just kept on going. That she participated in so many different phases of it and became the project. There's now a PhD electrical engineering student who has been involved since the beginning of EcoMod in all of the projects. Now on his 4th project. And he's pursuing his PhD, and it keeps kind of getting in the way from focusing on EcoMod. Of course, his PhD is pretty directly related. He works on the monitoring team, focusing on monitoring the projects. I call it a design, build, evaluate project as opposed to just strictly a design, build project because I think it's really important that the next generation of architects learn how to objectively evaluate their work. Architects are very good at being confident. We're not always so good at being humble, and so I think it's really important to be able to look back at what you've done, understand what you've done, and get beyond that. And so that's why I've structured this as an iterative process that involves an evaluation phase where you go back and assess it in a variety of ways. So we've completed 3 projects so far, as you'll see in the boards in there. And I'm going to go through quickly some of the images just to kind of give you a sense of it. And we're in the midst of doing one right now, the 4th project. At a minimum, we'll do an EcoMod 5. There may be a 6 as well. It always depends on funding and scheduling and all sorts of stuff. And we really try to look at different methods of prefabrication to understand where we should be operating and how we best can translate these ideas to the prefabricated housing industry. And that's I've been saying this, the project's been going on since the fall of '04, so I've been saying this for, 4.5 years now. just recently, I really feel like we've begun to make some real progress on that. We're now in negotiations and discussions with other nonprofits that are interested in taking the designs, adapting them to their sites, and having modular builder build them, which of course means I need to find a modular builder that has the capacity to build them. It seems everybody's got capacity now because the housing market's in a tank, and everybody's just struggling to find projects. So they're more open to thinking about slightly, well, maybe more than slightly alternative ways of building. The modular housing industry, to distinguish it from the panelized housing industry, is a pretty conservative industry. They do things a certain way, and they don't like to rethink what they do. But I think we're on the cusp of seeing a radical transformation in the modular industry as well. So I'm just going to go through quickly some of these images. The first project we did, it's a 2-unit condominium. It's actually the first 2-unit condominium in Charlottesville. It went on the market at the top of the market in '05. And this was for a nonprofit that is a low to moderate income housing organization. Unlike Habitat, which is always aiming, I think roughly right now, Habitat's about 30 to 60% of area median income, as opposed to this other nonprofit. They will focus anywhere from 50 to 110% of area median income. And Charlottesville's a small town, a small college town, but actually the real estate market is still inflated. It's still, it's a very stable income economy there, and so it's very expensive housing. Building stuff is very expensive there. So we're kind of working around, how to do affordable housing in a community like that. There's the completed house. It was built as, it's actually, like I said, 2 units. The upper unit is the 2 stories you can see here. I don't know if I threw an image in here or not of the kind of lower part, which the topography steps down, and that's where the lower unit is, down below. It was built as 8 modules. We've got a rainwater collection system, and a lot of careful emphasis on just keeping a simple, flexible interior layout so that the family can live in a variety of different ways without the small home, the design of the small home getting in their way. Designers like to do all sorts of cool things, but sometimes it keeps people from living the way that they actually want to live. And so let me move on. There's the stair and stuff, and there's a lot more stuff in there. But to kind of explain a little bit how we do this, the university owns this decommissioned airplane hangar, which I wish I discovered back in the days of the Solar Decathlon, because we didn't really have a legitimate place to build. But when I found that it existed, I kind of moved in out there, and it's been a great experience. The university's been very forgiving, I guess, is the way to describe it. They've let me stay. And we build the modules, or in the case of the second project, panels. We did the second project purely as panels. Out there at the hangar, and then we bring them into the location and crane them into place, just like a modular builder would. I work with one modular advisor in particular who really keeps us honest about our detailing and our process to make sure that these things can translate easily to the modular industry. I've met with other people as well, but I have one guy in particular that I go back to. He comes down, every couple of months and helps the team. And this is I like to say this is the most important photograph of all. This is the moment at which the students who have been working on this project, since the beginning of the project, they really know it. They've already graduated at this point. This is the summer after they've graduated. They're sticking around with a really pathetic fellowship that I've gotten them that barely pays for their rent and their ramen noodles. And they are at this moment gathering together everything they learned through the whole process, and that's the moment at which it really crystallizes, because they thought they knew what this stuff they were working on, it would happen to be the interior cabinetry on the first project, was all about. But they realized at that moment it wasn't going to work the way that they had drawn it. And it's such a classic lesson at that point, even when you really think you figured it out, that it doesn't quite do it the way you want to. And at that point is the moment at which you have to kind of gather everything you know and figure out a solution. Whereas previous in the project, I might step in and say, hey, you could do it this way or that way and sketch out some ideas. At this point in this project, I intentionally stayed out of it and let them figure it out because they knew the design at that point better than I did, the thing they wanted to accomplish better than I did. And they, at that point, had the skills to pull it all together. So from an educational point of view, that's what projects like this are all about. Those two students are off doing great things, by the way. She's in Sri Lanka helping to rebuild after the tsunami there, working for the UN. And the guy there is working part-time as a design build instructor at the Boston Architectural Center. So, you know, they've moved on and they're carrying on with the tradition. The evaluation phase, this is an example of a wiring diagram. I don't know if there's any electrical engineers here or not, but this is a way overdone evaluation monitoring system for you know, just the upper unit at Econ 1, way overdone. But it's a good learning curve, you know. But you know, we monitored everything, but the building was made of structural insulated panels, and so there's no stratification of air, so it didn't need to have all these sensors. But anyways, it was a good experience. We've learned since then. So real quick, this is the next project we did was down in Mississippi. It came about through kind of a strange way. Some money came into the Habitat affiliate in the city of Charlottesville to participate in the post-Katrina rebuilding effort, send houses down there. And so we kind of tagged along with that and said, well, we'll do one of those houses too. And so we sent it down there, and as I was describing to the local Habitat person that I just met here, you know, this is what we learned in this project is how not to participate in a post-disaster habitat effort. Not that we made any major mistakes, we just, you know, it's just really hard to do this kind of stuff, and you can't ever figure out exactly how much planning you need to do one of these things. I mean, it's really challenging. The design is described a bit more in there, but the idea was to use very strictly the Habitat guidelines, but make the house feel a lot larger by having outdoor spaces work into the mass of the building, and therefore help with the passive design aspects of the project. So we built it as panels out at that airport, and we also built some custom cabinetry and some IKEA cabinetry. And then we got down there and realized that there was no foundation that was supposed to be there, so they got to learn how to build a foundation. It totally messed up the schedule, and you know, the whole thing just, from that moment, I had no idea how much longer it was going to take. I knew it was going to take a lot longer. It ended up taking another 18 months, frankly, to get it done. Not continuous work by any means. It sat untouched for 6 months at a time, and you know, we just had to figure out ways to finish this thing up. So it wasn't perfect. By the way, I tell these kinds of stories because I think it's really important to not just stand up here and say, aren't we great, we do all these great things. You know, I want to say, you know, actually we've made mistakes, we haven't done everything right, we're learning a lot of stuff along the way, and we're just really trying hard to figure out what the right way to do a project like this is. Maybe by Econ 20 I'll have it totally figured out, but even then I'm sure there'll be something else. And we were able to get photovoltaic panels on that roof down there, which is really helpful for the family. Our evaluation for this will be somewhat limited. We're just going to be monitoring the performance of the PVs and how much that offsets their electrical bills. So this last project that we completed was actually a combination of historic preservation and new modules. On the right is the historic house. Then we put a modular bedroom addition on the back of it. The idea was that this would be a modular system that could be attached to any home. Now in this case it happened to be a historic home, but it could be put on any home. And we put two of those same modules, or similar modules, together, attached to each other as an accessory unit in the back. The zoning in Charlottesville now allows for accessory units, or granny flats, or whatever you might call them. And a challenging topography, and this was the most complex project ever, because this is the existing house, and it actually looks good in this picture. I mean, it was really in bad shape. And so the process we went through was to imagine what it could become, and then get it there to some degree. You can't see the modules in this picture, but it was a very complex process. The boards really explain that a lot better in terms of this effort and what we went through. But you know, we're really happy with how it worked out. By the way, when I'm showing interior pictures, those are not the furniture of the homeowners. These are like borrowed furniture from students and faculty, just to kind of dress them up for the picture. There's a lot more furniture, let's say, in this living room, I think is a more accurate way to describe it. And we tried to keep as much of the original material as possible. The house was, we're pretty sure it was built as a former slave quarters. So it had a fascinating history, and we were able to bring in architectural historians and historic preservationists to participate in this process, because we have some on our faculty, as well as students, and also local practitioners of this, who really helped out a lot. And it was an amazing, amazing process. I don't have time to describe it here, but we learned a lot. And then in terms of the modules, we thought about different types of modules and how they could be added in different ways. That's the accessory unit in the back. That's an interior of the accessory unit. Turns out that these two units were sold together as one unit. The rear accessory unit is a rental unit. The guy who bought the main house is renting out to a friend of his. And so we built those modules out at the hangar again. We drove them down the road at 65 miles an hour. There's always this amazing moment when you're driving these things down the road and you're literally behind them. You know, like I'm in the car right behind that, freaking out, like, is it gonna fall off? What's gonna happen? You know, and of course they all survive and everything is fine. And then we crane them into place. And we're evaluating them using a wireless monitoring system with far fewer sensors this time, and trying to get feedback to the occupant, which is always a challenge. We haven't quite figured out an affordable, easy way to do that dependably, but we've got a prototype and it's mostly working. We're also monitoring the green roof that are on top of the modules. And this current project that we're doing, it's a 900 square foot, 2-bedroom house for Afghani refugees in the city of Charlottesville. We started off, that's not the house by the way, we started off this process with a kind of a quick warm-up project to kind of get people, you know, working as a team collaboratively and understanding how to work together. They had to take all reclaimed materials and had a budget total of $10 to maybe, if they needed to buy some fasteners or something like that, and build a little shelter and sleep in it that night. And then, so we did this little mini week-long design, build, evaluate project. They designed it, they built it, they slept in it, and then we evaluated them the morning after. Had a little competition even, almost like a mini solar decathlon. This was the one where they took kind of a geodesic dome. This one collapsed, by the way, due to the morning dew in the morning. As you can imagine structurally why, right? If architecture students look at what about that detail would be weak if it's wet from above. And so this is the schematic as it exists at the end of last semester. When I return tomorrow, we'll be beginning the second phase of the design process and begin construction on this in March. It's just 2 simple modules that are sit on top of each other, and then a couple stair chunks, we call them, sitting at the back that will also be built as volumes, and we'll crane them into place. Kind of a diagram of how that's all organized and what that's about, some quick interior perspectives on it. We got a bunch of awards. We had the governor come out and cut the ribbon on the last one, and I'm going to leave the rest of the time for questions for you guys.